You're in touch with 94 FM, WKTI Milwaukee.
From ABC News, I'm Bob Walker, and this is Perspective, reports, analysis, and commentary from our correspondents around the world who work where news is happening. This week, ABC's Chris Harper and Syria's role in the Middle East. From New York, ABC financial correspondent Philip Greer looks at interest rates in the economy. And from Washington, correspondents Herbert Kaplow, Vic Ratner, and Bob Clark discuss the civil rights movement in America and what has happened since the March on Washington some 20 years ago. The story about Syria on Perspective in just a moment.
If you want to find me, you got to take the interstate out of town for a couple of miles and head west on the river road to the old TK farm. It's all burned out now, so is everything around it. So I'm the only one left out here. Guess I survived because I was the oldest and toughest and sort of hiding in a hollow by the bend in the river at the time. And none of my friends made it. Some of them I knew for 60, 70 years. Most of them were younger, of course. Kids, really. Strong, strapping, healthy kids, too. But none of them stood a chance when those two fools went off and left their campfire burning. The wind come by and everything went up for miles around. Of course, the birds and the squirrels and they all got away. We couldn't. Our roots are here. Now I'm the only tree left.
A public service of this station, the Forest Service, USDA, your state foresters, and the Ad Council.
There is no doubt Syria is as key a country in the current Middle East standoff as anyone. Syrian troops are, of course, in Lebanon and show no signs of leaving anytime soon. We've got an update from ABC's Chris Harper.
American author Ambrose Bierce once described a boundary between two countries this way. A boundary, he wrote, is an imaginary line that divides the imaginary rights of one country from the imaginary rights of another. That description is exactly right when it comes to Lebanon and Syria. Put simply, the Syrian government never really has accepted the French decision in 1943 to make Lebanon an independent country run by the Christians. It was the desire of the French to have at least one Christian country in the sea of Muslims in the Middle East. It is important to remember that Syria has never established diplomatic relations with Lebanon because of the feeling that Syria and Lebanon are really one. That feeling is at the center of the current dispute over the treaty between Lebanon and Israel. It is simply one of the many ways that Syria is often misunderstood. That's not to say that the Syrian government and President Hafez al-Assad are innocent, well-intentioned parties to talks in the Middle East. The Syrians are tough, sometimes brutal, difficult bargainers whose interests are often the same as the Soviet Union. But they are a factor, an important factor with whom the Americans, Lebanese, and Israelis must deal. Henry Kissinger once described President Assad as the most interesting leader in the Middle East. Sometimes brilliant, always tough. It is amazing, however, that throughout the years the United States has never understood how to deal with Syria. The negotiations over Lebanon are a case in point. The United States, Israel, and Lebanon spent weeks working out a precise accord on the departure of Israeli troops from Lebanon. During that time, both the U.S. and Lebanon assured Syria that the positions of Damascus would be considered during the talks, even though no representative of the Assad government was present. When the agreement was reached last May, George Shultz then went to Syria. What did he tell President Assad? That the Lebanese would tell him everything about the agreement. It is not surprising that Assad felt that the Americans had once again tried to slip something past him. What do the Syrians really want? First of all, they want the Americans and everyone else to admit that Syria is an important player in the Middle East, not a Soviet puppet, not a third-rate country, but a country that plays a significant role in the region. Second, the Syrians want a complete evacuation of Israeli soldiers from Lebanon before the Syrian army will pull out. President Assad argues that Israel invaded Lebanon, while Syria was invited to send its troops into Beirut during the civil war. Therefore, the Israeli presence is not legitimate. The Syrian presence was. Third, President Assad wants some guarantee that the international highway between Damascus and Beirut will be open and under the control of neutral forces, perhaps an international peacekeeping force. The Bekaa Valley is only 25 miles from Damascus, a key military and supply link for Syria. Fourth, the headwaters of the river system that irrigates the Syrian breadbasket are located inside Lebanon. Water is a precious asset in the Middle East, and Syria wants to make sure that there is no threat to its supply. Fifth, the Syrians want some discussion of the Golan Heights, seized by Israel during the 1967 war and annexed 2 years ago. It is unlikely that the U.S. or Israel is willing to discuss this issue, but the Golan Heights remains an important factor in the negotiating position of the Assad government. Sixth, President Assad simply does not like the way that the Americans have negotiated peace in the region. In the Syrian view, the accord between Lebanon and Israel is an extension of the step-by-step negotiations started by Henry Kissinger.